safety. So real quick before I get into, normally I like having you guys start talking. I just want to make sure that we just cover a couple of things. Number one, I'm not here to train you how to be a safety professional. That's not what this discussion is about. This is about how do we as leaders become a little bit better at influencing the safety in our organizations through better leadership. So just a couple little definitions as we talk about safety, hazard, potential source for harm. Harm is anything that can have a negative outcome, such as an injury, an illness, damage to property, environment, health, or reputation potentially. An incident, anything unplanned that disrupts normal operations and could cause harm. And then risk, when we talk about risk, and we use that term, the probability that an incident is going to cause harm combined with the magnitude potential. So just some good basic definitions as we think about that. So let's jump into this first question here. And this is when you guys start talking. And with a large group in here, we could definitely use some hand raising functions on here and understand that if nobody's talking, I call on people. And if you can't talk, that's okay. But that's the way it works. So first question, as you can see up there, what is the relationship between leadership and safety? Who'd like to go first? All right, Jasper, go for it. And make sure you come off of your mute too, because you may still be muted.
Yeah, I was. Sorry about that. One of the relationships I can recognize right away is, as part of leadership, it's your responsibility to lead by example, and that ties into safety. Sharing safety ideas, ensuring that your team is safe. It's a culture that you have to create.
All right, so what are some examples then that you need to set in your organization? You talked about a couple, maybe give a couple specific examples. Where do you set the example? How do you do that?
Well, what one is constantly wearing safety glasses. We're required to do so, and I lead by example by having those safety glasses on and reminding those that don't.
Yeah, and we'll definitely get to kind of where that fits. But you're absolutely right; those little things, and I think this we think about setting the example. It also extends like, what do you do at your house? I'll give one example that when I hired somebody to start doing my yard, I mandated that the safety equipment will be worn. Otherwise, he doesn't mow my yard. And if he didn't have them, great. I got plenty. I'll loan them to you. All right. Nice. Jordan, you had your hand raised a little earlier there. What are some of your thoughts there? What's the relationship between leadership and safety?
Well, unfortunately, Jasper hit on both of the things I was going to say, both
So I
leading
guess
by
you got to come up with a
example
third
and
then.
cultural.
All right. Well, let's talk about culture a little bit. What is your safety culture? Who defines it?
Well, I think that it starts at the top. I think that by starting off with leading by example, but then also respecting other people's thoughts. We just recently talked about a stop work authority. So when someone thinks that something is unsafe, they have the authority to stop work and they're expected to stop work. And
Yep.
then ultimately congratulating, recognizing, rewarding those people that are proactive as opposed to reactive. And so I think that that feeds into the culture of a safety first mindset.
Yeah, and I don't want anybody to minimize what you just said there, Jordan. How does the leadership respond when somebody uses the stop work authority? That single element right there will more directly impact whether it continues to happen or not than anything else. Is it respected? Is it celebrated? Is it talked about? Or is they degraded? Are they shut down for it? You know, those matter. I have that a little later in here in one of my discussions point, but how you as the leaders respond when somebody exercises that critically important in that relationship. Amelia, you had your hand up next.
So I recently transitioned from a technology company into healthcare, and it opened my eyes to a completely different side of safety. I work from home, and I started enrolling in all the various trainings, and we had patient de-escalation and how to respond in emergencies and lab safety. And at first I started scoffing, thinking, I do billing. I don't need any of this stuff. And then I realized, you know what? I walk past a lab every time I go into the office. My hand washing in the bathrooms, if I go into the office, and come out and then touch something that a nurse then touches could, impact somebody else. Don't worry, I wash my hands anyway. But it really opened my eyes to the different ways that all of these safety precautions, maybe I will have to de-escalate a patient. I hope not. But if I walk through a clinic or a hallway on my way to a meeting, my actions as a leader and as a part of the organization are vitally important, even though I'm not the one that's usually on the front lines.
Yeah. And I think that that's important. And I love when new people come in and show a new perspective and ask questions that we just take for granted. Like, well, why do we do that? Okay, that's a good question. Why do we do that? I think those questions, then the new set of eyes and the unknown, I think that those are vastly important for leaders to look at those perspectives. Deanna, you got your hand up, please. What you got for us?
Yeah, so I'm a remote worker too. And even back in the day when I was a manager for over a group of remote workers, safety plays a big key in what we do as well when we're remote workers. We're consistently visiting with patients, we're consistently on the phone with insurance companies, and as a leader, it's our responsibility to be able to protect our employees from those unwanted conversations that we try to avoid having. There's also things that happen within our homes. We're here, some people that I have worked with, we are alone in our homes. We're
Yeah.
not in a building where we are surrounded by a security guard. So we have to, and as it has been mentioned, as a leader, we have to do what we can do to protect our employees from all of any type of reputable harm, whether it become from someone who is blatantly obnoxious or gets nasty with us on a phone call, whether it be a physician, a patient, or an insurance company, or any other source. And the leadership is all culture driven, as well as ensuring that we have the SOPs in place and the policies to ensure that we keep our employees safe.
Yeah. And I think you hit on a lot of that. For anybody who's gone through the leadership course, we have a really interesting discussion. We talk about responsibility versus accountability.
Mhm.
So everybody's responsible for safety in the place, but the one person who owns everything that does or does not happen in your organization, that's you. You, the leader, own that. You don't get to shy that responsibility away. You're not allowed to. It doesn't happen. You're responsible for everything that does and doesn't happen. I know Jordan and has recently taken on an elevated position, and he owns it now. Everything that happens at GCC, yep, it's his. You have accountability for everything that does or doesn't happen, but it happens at every level in there. We can delegate responsibility, but we can't delegate that, or that ownership. We can't delegate that. Now, I love safety departments. So anything that I say in this discussion is no disrespect to any safety departments. I love them to death. But who owns safety, the safety department or the leaders? Let's see. I'm going to call on Franklin. What do you think? Who owns it?
I kind of knew that was coming. It's it's the leadership, right?
Yeah.
So the safety department actually is a tool for the leadership to ensure that safety is regulated and taken care of.
Yeah, they are experts, and I love them to death, and they have fabulous ideas, and they know the systems, and they know the processes. but ultimately you as the leader are going to make it happen or not make it happen. No safety department is going to be able to function if you, the leader, don't make sure that the behaviors are done. And that's what I talk about. You, the leader, own the behaviors. Whether you allow people to, operate in ways and make things up or figure things out, or what risks you allow them to take, what procedures that you have, those are all you, the leader. And if we think about our basic tenet of human behaviors, that people are going to do what they're rewarded for. So how do we get better behaviors out of people? We recognize and reward the behaviors we want repeated. We identify and correct the behaviors you want changed. Now, if you as the leader don't know what those behaviors are yet, okay, got a little work to do, but that's all right. If you find that, hey, it's okay if, just to save a little bit of time, instead of going and you're going to hammer on something, instead of having an extension to hammer with, you're just going to hold your hand on it and allow that to happen. Well, you've just now said that's okay. If you see it happen and you don't say anything, you said that it's okay. So I like this question, and this always gets a good little bit of debate in here. So what's an acceptable standard for safety? Who'd like to take a crack at that one first?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. So what I'm looking at is, what's an acceptable standard for safety? So let's say, some people look at a total frequency of incident rate, or, something else like that. They measure it in some ways. What's an acceptable standard for safety?
I can say it's pressure from above. It's pressure for protection of unnecessary noise.
Okay. So does that mean that there's a certain amount is allowed, or none is allowed?
No, I think a certain amount is allowed, and it's our job to do that.
Okay. Michael, you got your hand raised. What's your thought on this one, please? Michael Billingsley. Nice to see you again. I haven't talked to you in several years.
Well, as far as what's acceptable, I would accept 100% safe, being 100% safe.
Okay. James, you got your hand up? Let's hear yours.
Say hi.
Hey, Ken.
Hey, Eric, James, how you
I'm
guys
here with
doing?
James.
Good,
Good.
gentlemen. How you doing? Hey, yeah, I want to elaborate that I think the standard needs to be set, and it needs to be 100% accountable for safety. An acceptable standard is when everybody comes out with all their 10 fingers and 10 toes at the end of the year, and we must have zero tolerance for anybody that's not going to follow those regulations and or rules and standards that are set by the leadership.
Yeah, it's a hard reality, but I agree. I agree with you and Michael. Zero incidents, zero is the standard. That's the only acceptable standard. If anybody says, well, zero is not possible, you can't be perfect, I always challenge this as, well, okay, if zero is not possible, then what's acceptable? And inevitably, a lot of times somebody will give an answer that, a certain rate isn't acceptable. Well, then I say, okay, so this is your organization. You tell me, who in your organization are you okay with getting hurt? I want you to name them for me. And of course, you get crickets, because nobody's going to want to put a name out there. I think that it is a high standard, but we as leaders must only accept that zero is not only possible, it's the only acceptable standard. And when we live with that idea that any deviation from that is unacceptable, then we start in the right place. Because that's a hard standard. I don't know of any organization, that maintains that over a long period of time. But that as a leader, I encourage you to take that mindset that zero is the only acceptable standard. Now, as a leader, I'm also not one of those that says, okay, well, a no tolerance and a zero tolerance aren't the same thing. Doesn't mean that we get rid of anybody that has an incident. That's not what I'm talking about either. But what I believe is that every incident needs an appropriate leader response. What does that response look like? And how are we then committing ourselves to doing everything possible to ensure that not only that one doesn't happen again, but similar ones don't happen again? But that's a mindset. And I really encourage you as a leader to start there. Start at 0. That's it. No exception, no deviation, nothing else. Nothing else will work. All right. So let's talk about errors. Errors happen, and oftentimes the source of incidents are errors. So here's another fun question I like asking. Are all errors caused by human errors? What are some thoughts on that one?
And I'll jump in. I'll
All right,
say,
Eric.
yeah, a lot of times, and we're finding this. We had some recordables last year, and that's a big focus last year. It's gonna be a big focus this year, but a lot of it's process driven as much as it is, or more than it is, human error driven. At least that's
Okay.
what we find.
Who wrote the process?
For some things, maybe a process doesn't exist that should, right?
Okay.
So
All right. Yeah. No, I agree. Amelia, what you got? Let's hear some more thoughts on this.
Yeah, I was going to go down the same path about process. But I think that if there is an error due to a lack of process, then that is a human error in not having a process. Or if a process breaks or, whatever, then, we need to have mitigation steps in place for that because things won't always flow perfectly. That's the nature of life. And so I think it does all boil down to it may not be caused per se, but it's a human responsibility to prevent that error from happening.
Okay. Deanna, what you thought? What are your thoughts?
I'm thinking environmental.
Okay.
There's just some things, it doesn't matter whether you work outside in an industry that requires you to be outside, or whether you're in an environment where you're stuck working remotely. There's things that are in the environment that we just cannot control.
Okay. Let's throw a couple others. Pam, you got your hand up. Please share your
Yes,
thoughts.
I just wanted to say that I believe that about 70 to 90% are attributed to human error, but they're caused by an underlying problem. Either they don't have enough training, they're confused about the processes. So it comes back to human error, right?
Yeah.
It always comes, but it could also be their training, their knowledge, their understanding.
Yeah. So I'll get back to that in a minute. So my view on this, and I'll own it as my opinion, and I will encourage you to take a similar approach, but in my view, all errors are caused by humans. And in fact, we want it that way because that's what we can fix. If we say that, well, an error is caused by the environment, well, then that allows us to have that gap in our mindset that's allowable. It's contradictory to a zero defect, zero incident mentality. If we look at it like every incident and every error is in some way, shape, or form caused by human error, that gives us the ability to fix it, to mitigate it, to prevent it. By accepting the idea that all errors are human errors, it's a positive thing because we can do something about a human error. If we just say, no, that's just going to be circumstance, that allows a gap. I'm just going to throw all these up at once there instead of talking about each one individually. But if we think about the different forms of human error, in some way, shape, or form, not having a process, well, that's a misunderstanding. Or, it could be inadvertent, making a mistake without knowing about it. Hopefully we're avoiding willful ones where people, do it on purpose or intentional. But misunderstandings, identifying the situation wrong, the skill that we just talked about, that Pam just talked about, that's a human error. because we're allowing people to go into an experience where they're not fully ready yet. So I don't say this in a bad way, but I say it in a leadership way. Let's accept the fact that all errors are human errors, and that means we can do something with them. And we can look at, well, what error is it? How do we do that? So other thoughts, anyone want to challenge me? I'm okay with challenges on that. That's what we're here to talk about. Or a couple other thoughts on it. I presented something new. Kevin, how about you? Talk to you, Kevin Hayes. What are your thoughts as I present something a little bit new and challenging and different to your mindset? Or maybe not different?
Well, it is a heightened situation for us. We've been fortunate over years past. This is, a weak point of mine that I'm trying to do better, stronger, and we've had some with the volume of people that our business has increased. Went from 60, 80 employees to 130 in all these locations, and here's my thing. I think we hear this from the new people is you assume everybody knows how to be safe and what to do. And that's part of a downfall, right? You assume that all these new people coming in know how to act safe, know how to follow it. And that's not the case. You have to take these people and the new folks and the younger ones and reinstill them, whether it's engineers or things. And I think that's where some of our pitfalls have come in, because we've added a lot of shop guys and we've added a lot of young people. And to the point of the processes or not having processes, that's all valid. It's just, if we knew all the downfalls, we'd fix them, right? You'd fix them before they started. I do like the zero policy, because it is the goal. No one wants to lose a finger or a life. It's something we stress, but maybe it's never stressed. It's never overstressed, right? So that's been a sobering over the last 6 months. Like, okay, why are we having these little things pop up? And thank God they were all minor incidents, serious, but there weren't any serious deals. But I think that's a big challenge as business grows, as you try to do different things. There's just and you could say training, but you can't overtrain. So that's kind of where my mindset has been, is how do we get these young people, or even experienced people, coming to work for us for the first time. They might have been in industry 20, 30 years, but they haven't worked at our place. So those are some of the obstacles, challenges, and things that we're trying to quantify, because my point is, if we knew where the faults were, we'd fix them. We don't know. A lot of times they pop up, like someone mentioned. It's just a new process that you never did before.
Yeah.
So,
or a condition that you hadn't seen before. It's the same process, new condition.
Right. No doubt.
It's interesting. If you, I don't have all the data, so I'm not fully on the data, but what I remember from a lot of the data is that most incidents occur when people are really new or extremely experienced. And you expect the new. That's kind of what you would expect. But what's the surprising part is that really, really experienced people also have a higher incident rate of injury.
Why is that?
Well, that's a good question. Why do you think that is? Let's throw that out to the group. A beautiful question. Jasper, what you got for us?
Complacency.
Could be complacency. They've done it a lot. You're right. They don't have the same care. They don't have the same concern. They've seen it plenty of times before. They're overconfident. Yeah. Or they don't realize that there's a better way.
A lot of times they have a lot of experience, and there's time limitations. So they're pressured to go ahead and accept the risk and try to get the job done. We've run into that before, where I don't know how many people have worked on an elevator at the top of the shaft on 29th floor and hung off a rope to, change the electronics. But I had never done that. And we had to look at that and have a crew do that. I had no earthly idea how to do it in the dark safely. So, I could see where that would have been a disaster. And, And part of your safety program has to be that risk analysis, right? That's like, oh no, that's too crazy. We can't do it. Let's take our time, figure out methodically how we're going to do this safely and get the safety folks involved, and let's develop a plan. And it's something that you haven't seen before. So you don't have a safety plan for that because nobody ever does that. And so you just, but the experienced guys just want to jump in there and go, I can do this. Like management has to go, no.
You're right. The experienced guy who's done this 20 times, maybe he's never done it in the dark before, but he's done it 20 times. Like, oh yeah, I got this, no problem. Yeah, they don't anticipate changes. They don't see how the conditions are different than they've done it before. They get lulled into this false sense. And I think you hit something on there. More experienced people tend to have a higher tolerance for risk than somebody who's new. They're kind of like, oh yeah, I've seen something like that before. It worked out okay in the past. Yeah, we can do that, even though it might not be the best way to do something. So Kevin, I think that's something else to look at a little bit there, is that more senior people tend to have a higher tolerance for risk. And you talked about something, Frank, that we're going to come to here in a little bit, having a process for it. So let's talk a little bit about the process. So as a group, we've got a lot of leaders on here. What are some of the techniques and the things that you and your organization do? How do you identify hazards? What are some of the things that you guys are doing to identify hazards? Chris, please, what you got for us?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that we need to focus more on is walking the floor, actually being on the shop floor and observing. Sometimes I think we just, if we do sit in the office or, take something for granted we think is going on the right way, but don't actually put our eyes on it, it might not, processes might not be being adhered to like we think they are.
Exactly. Yeah, you don't know what's going on. You can't tell how your manufacturing is going from your office. You can't see any hazards or identify any hazards from your office. So I agree with you. Walking the floor, critical. That's a great way of getting a new set of eyes. Awesome. Other ideas. What else are you guys doing out there to identify hazards? Again, hazard is something that has the potential for harm.
Ken.
I'll come to you next, James. Go ahead, Amelia, and then we'll go to James next, and then Deanna after that.
Just have a very easy, clear way for anybody to report them, whether it's anonymously or not, where they don't fear that they're going to get in trouble for reporting something. We have on our intranet an eye care report that anybody can access anytime, put it in, and it's handled.
Yeah.
But it could be as simple as a little box next to your office or whatever.
Yeah. Now, I will challenge that if you need to have an anonymous system, your leadership is broken. If people are afraid to come up with a hazard because they're afraid of repercussions, you have a significant leadership challenge. If that's the organization, then your organization and people are afraid to report hazards, you as the leader better look in the mirror and fix that.
Well, and this is used for other things as well, but
just saying, I'm not making any accusations for anybody on the call, but I'm just saying that if you feel like you need to have an anonymous thing, then look in the mirror, because that's a problem. That's a leadership problem right there. James, you were next.
Yeah, Ken, just like Amelia saying, less the internet, we do have a see something, say something policy within our company, which is really important. And as a leader, if you don't know what's happening out there, how will you know unless an incident actually happens, right? So if there's something happening, the guys that have the feet on the ground, the boots in the ground, they're going through the processes out there and actually living the life and working through it. We need to reward and award and recognize those that, hey, if you see something, say something. We'll stop it right there, bring it to your first line supervisor so we can implement either a process or some sort of safety for that. And then give them a kudos, be it an attaboy or some $25 reward or certificate. That's what we're trying, HydroQuip here.
Yeah, absolutely. You recognize and reward the behaviors you want repeated. When somebody finds a good hazard, definitely reward that acknowledgement of it, but most importantly, fix it. Do something about it, because if somebody reports it and nothing happens, what's their likelihood that they're going to do anything in the future? Low. All right, we'll go Deanna and then we'll go Sarah next.
Yeah, Ken, it's it's understanding your employees' workflow process and what is the workflow process of the job. And also looking at their environment and ensuring that the environment that they are in, whether they are sitting at the front desk or at the nurse's station, understanding where everything is supposed to be located and understanding how their workflow process meets with their environment. So for me, it was always helpful for me whenever I was working with front desk staff to understand what their workflow process was and what their environment looked like.
Okay, definitely take an evaluation, a deliberate thought about that. Sarah, what you got for us?
So right now, one of my teams is looking at new technology applications. And so whenever you have a new technology, you don't really know what your hazards are. So within that context, we're trying to understand what's the application. Is it a existing technology that has a new application? And so we need to understand how those pieces fit together and what those different scenarios are. And we're also looking at, I guess, more details once that scenario is more well-defined, materials of construction, pressures that might change or deviate from normal operations, looking at those abnormal conditions. That's what we're looking at to try and determine those hazards.
Yeah, in a situation like that where you haven't done it yet, and you have to make your best guess sometimes and put some thought through it and some analysis through it and have a deliberate process where you do a deliberate risk assessment or risk analysis of it. And, you ask those questions. And I think one of the things that's really critical in that process is, making sure that the people who are going to operate the process are there for that. Not just the engineers that designed it in that instance, but who's going to be the person on the ground, running it. What are their thoughts? Having the right people in the room, and it's not always the smartest people in the room. It's sometimes the most experienced, but it's also sometimes the newest person who doesn't know anything, but's going to ask a lot of questions because they don't know anything yet. Having a diverse group in there with different experiences and different knowledges and having that. So absolutely, good point on that one, Sarah, that those ones take a lot of thought when it's new and we don't do it. But sometimes we're a little more deliberate with those than when we've been doing it for, years. And we just don't always stop to think about it either. All right, other ideas. What else are you guys doing out there to identify hazards? Any fun or creative things you guys got going on? I'm going to randomly pick on somebody there. How about Betty? What do you guys do? What are some of the things that you look at doing and how you look at identifying some good hazards?
Well, we're not around equipment or anything like that. We're insurance agents. So it's kind of hard to know when somebody's writing a bad policy. So,
well, yeah, in that aspect, but at the same time, you guys have a ton of thought process about underwriting and what history has looked like.
We have a link that we're all on. So if anybody has a question, they reach out to that link, and most of us reach back out to them to help them.
Okay.
So, and that can be where trial and error is at, where it's human error. It's all about, education. So, but
what you had there was actually really brilliant. You said you have a number or a place to reach out when you have questions.
Yes.
That becomes an interesting thing in a safety leadership thing is what do people do if they don't know the answer?
They just reach out. Our owner of the business and all the agents are on this same link, and they pretty much get an immediate answer. And yeah.
So that's a challenge to the others on the call. What's your process if somebody doesn't know an answer to something? So again, I'm not just something for you as leaders to think about. Well, what does that look like?
Then we go straight to the owner, like 911.
Yeah. See, and that's actually great because then you don't have to worry about should I call somebody? Should I not? Where do I go? What about this? I don't know. you feel very comfortable using the system.
Right. And
You're
there's
ready to go if you don't have an answer.
and we have so many people on this chat that have been there for years. And our owner is constantly looking at it. She sees when stuff comes in. So if somebody gives a wrong answer or there's a righter, more correct answer, she bings in on it. So we've got it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's self-correcting in some ways.
Yes.
If somebody else puts a bad idea out there, then it's a little bit
Yes.
self-correcting. Yeah, that's good because you're right. Not every idea is a good idea.
Right.
Just because you get an answer doesn't mean it's the right answer.
Correct.
Is there any vetting in that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, a few things just to think about, as a leader and think about your systems. I like kind of having categories of hazards, and you go through each one of those categories, says, all right, well, what are our mechanical hazards? What are our chemical hazards? What are our environmental hazards? And you have a little bit of a deliberate thought process that you go through versus just wondering like, what are our hazards? I don't know. Let me think about that. So you have kind of an idea of, well, let's look at these specifically. You narrow your mindset a little bit, then you have a chance of maybe thinking of something you might have missed. I love the idea of a dedicated event. Hey, all right, we're going to stop what we're doing. We're going to pull people from a bunch of different places over here. We're going to look at this process and we're going to see, every hazard that we can identify. Not trying to fix the hazards, but just identify, well, what are all the things that could give us harm? And it could be an entire process. It could be an area of it. It could be a work cell, but you have a dedicated event where this is a hazard identification. Not opposed to, external views, bringing somebody else in or having somebody else look at things, or having different peers look at it like, hey, I'm going to come over and look at your area. You come over and look at mine, and you swap areas for a little bit, and it's dedicated. And the whole purpose of that is to look for hazards. And then obviously, any incident, near misses or anything else like that, really understand, well, why did that really happen? What's the root cause? What do we need to fix? Not just like, oh, whoa, boy, let's hope that doesn't happen again. Brooks, please, what you got for us?
Ken, one thing we've done, we have 5 different box plants where we make cardboard boxes basically. And so what we do is every Tuesday with our senior leadership, we get together on a call. We go through our near misses. We look at things like, it could be as simple, we want to know about the big near misses, but every once in a while, it's as simple as an air hose laying across the floor. Somebody didn't do 5S properly, things like that. We identify that. It's amazing. And just like you said, the self-correction, it's when you get 5 people from 5 different plants all discussing what's going on, you get some pretty open feedback about, well, that was dumb. How'd you guys let that happen? Things like that. It sounds kind of harsh, but amazingly enough, it's effective because you don't want to be the guy getting called out on the next call. You know what I mean? And
right.
So that's worked. It's also allowed us to share some things that would have been very difficult in the past to get out. As an example, we had a fire in one of our box plants about a month ago. It was a very oddball situation, but because it was on video, we were able to share that among that leadership group very quickly. Everyone saw it. It was actually, we didn't wait till the Tuesday meeting. We called an emergency meeting to talk about it because we didn't know if it was actually something specific to that plant, or did it have to do with our product itself? And did we get some bad paper? Did we get something that was had been compromised and caused the fire? Because it was an oddball situation. It allowed us to dig in much faster than we would have been able to do in the past. So it's kind of everyone sort of fought it at the beginning because it's like, well, we can't, how do you find an hour every Tuesday to do that? Well, guess what? It has been paying off very big for us. And suddenly now we're like, well, do we need to make it more than once a week? So now all of a sudden it's become important. And I think you asked what we can do. That's got to be the number one thing. It's got to be important to leadership, but it's got to be important to every person in that plant because like someone said, number one, we want them to leave the exact same way they walk in every day, not missing anything, no bumps on the head, nothing. We want them leaving the same way. So,
yep. No, and I think that Brooks, yours is a perfect example. Okay, the hose is on the floor. All right, if we just say we'll clean up the hose, well, okay, let's dig a little bit deeper. Do we have a dedicated place for the hose?
Exactly.
Or is there just no place to put the hose? Like, let's dig a little bit deeper than just the hose is on there. Like, does the person not care about the hose? Is it too far away and they got to do two different things?
Yep.
Like what's really going on with that?
Root-
Don't just look at it the surface of, we'll go pick
Yep.
up the hose. Now
Yeah,
let's dig a little deeper.
Yeah, root cause analysis, find out a little bit more. And, like you said at the beginning, everything really does go back to people, and when a process fails, it's because as people, we didn't identify what all those issues could have been. So
Right.
it's a great way to get it. And it is making a difference. At the beginning, we were all kind of like, is it really going to pay off? We're still having some issues, but they're much more minor than what they were. We've already cut our slip, trips, and falls just by getting it out there and talking about it, because again, nobody wants to be the guy on the next call to have to talk about an actual incident. We'd much rather talk about near misses than actual incidents. So, yep.
Nope, I agree. And we'd rather talk about, ideally, we'd like to talk more about prevention and great things we're doing to prevent anything. That needs to be our preferred dialogue.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But we got to get there. So we identified risks. Now or hazards. But if we're talking about risk is an evaluation of the frequency or the likelihood of it and the severity of it. Because everything has, some potential risk to it. What are you guys using right now as leaders? What systems do you have for identifying and categorizing events so that you know what level of either supervision or diligence you need for events? What are you guys using? Who'd like to go first? All right, I'm gonna pick on somebody. Chad, how about you? What are you guys using? Chad Adams.
Hey Ken, one of the things we do is every year we have audits, and one of them is a risk assessment in our audit where we grade things, and based on that kind of determines the severity of the risks.
Yeah, you got to do that, and there's a lot of different systems out there. Some form of risk assessment. Some people use a color system, a number system, or a name or a category or things like that, because not all risks are equal, and not all risks require the same diligence, and not all risks require the same level of authority to approve the operation. The question and the challenge I just encourage for everybody here as the leaders is to have a system so people know what risk are they authorized to operate under, what risk do they need to elevate to one supervisor, what risk has to go all the way up to the president to approve. What's the approving authority for the determined level of risk. So if you as a leader don't have a system like that and people don't know, you got a gap to fix. A simple example, easy one, looking at, higher probability versus impact, low probability, low impact, smaller risk versus higher probability, but a low impact, or low probability and a higher impact, or of course, then those high probabilities, high impact ones. Something, don't make it overly complicated. I've seen number systems where you do the math and it comes out with a product at the end, and it goes anywhere from 1 to 25. Don't really care which one you're using, but as a leader, I just encourage you, if you don't have a system yet, create some kind of a system so people know what is allowed, what's not allowed, and then update those as necessary. So let's talk mitigations. So we got risks out there, we got hazards out there. The ideal way is we need to minimize and mitigate those hazards to minimize either the likelihood of an incident or the severity if it happens. So we can reduce it in either of those two ways, reduces the overall risk. So what are some mitigations that you guys use out there? Some thoughts that you have? Let's share some ideas on mitigations. All right, we're going to go to some. Renee, we'll go with you. How do you guys in Yangming, what do you guys do for mitigation ideas and techniques?
Well, from an HR standpoint, basically, we probably do like some compliance trainings. That's all I can think of right now.
Okay, I put you on the spot.
I'm good. That's it.
All right. Who else would like to share a couple ideas? What else are your thoughts on mitigation?
Hey, Ken, this is Patrick.
Hey, Patrick, go ahead.
Hey, I know that, monthly and weekly we have safety talks with our people in the shop, or even monthly toolbox talks that we try to mitigate safety, whether it's slip, trips, and falls, heat safety, heat exhaustion, cold weather safety, and those type of things. So we like to plan out for our annual monthly toolbox talks, and then we also have weekly with Jen Monroe sends out her weekly safety huddles where our groups to get together in the shops and talk about ways to mitigate hazards out in the shop.
Yeah. And love all of those. And hopefully those things are doing things. My favorite tool, and I like to think about it as a leader, I encourage your mindset to really think about, is the hierarchy of controls. Thinking about the top of that is, can we eliminate the hazard? We just completely take it out so that it's no longer a hazard anymore. Substitute, can we do something else that's less hazardous? The next is engineering controls. I leave like a barrier or something like that where you physically can't, you're separating the individual from the hazard. Those are where we want to try to get most of our stuff done. Now, those are harder, they're more expensive, they're longer, they're more difficult. Sometimes we default to administrative controls, which are procedures that we have, training, job rotations, and the lowest level is the PPE. Okay, yep, I agree. Safety glasses are important. Steel-toed shoes are important. But all PPE is ever going to do is to minimize the effect. It's not going to ever remove a hazard. So what I encourage you as a leader to think about is, are we reaching as high as we can, or are we just accepting a lower level when a higher level is possible? And not that anything, everything is going to be helpful, but ideally, the higher we can get on the controls, number one, it's more effective. And number two, it's less dependent on people's behavior. You remove as much of that human interaction, and then you remove the human error factor of it. So really think about, mitigating to the highest level of a hierarchy possible. So let's talk a little bit more here. We got about 10 minutes left. What other tools do we have as leaders for leading through better safety? What else do we have? What else can we do as leaders? Let's go. How about Bobby? What you got for us? What are some ideas you think about, Bobby? All right. I don't know if you're talking, Bobby, but you're muted or maybe not. Who else haven't we heard from in a little bit here? Lori Barbandu or
Barbeau.
Barbeau.
Yeah.
What's some ideas you got for the group?
Well, I'm a solo operator, so everything that's being discussed here today, it's a challenge for me to apply that in my mind to my work area. We do have hazards in the house, but they aren't, it just isn't critical like in a factory or something like that. So when we talk about tools as a leader, I don't feel like I have something valuable to add to the conversation.
Okay, fair enough. So I'll just here's the list that I just kind of came up with as I was brainstorming. And I just kind of let you look at the list there for a minute. And if anything resonates or piques anybody's interest, let's chat about it. We've hit a lot of these. So the safety briefings, leaders sometimes just randomly showing up and listening and participating, and then giving feedback on not necessarily did they find all of the issues, but how did they run the process? Feedback and consequences. We talk about accountability, that if you don't provide feedback and consequences, don't expect any change.
Ken, it's Lori. It's Lori again.
Okay, please, Lori.
Okay, so you have on that list, on the right-hand side, train people on more than just the technical things. Can you expand on that?
Sure. I mean, if we think about, hey, I got a job to do. I got to build this widget. Here's the technical things you need to do to build the widget. Okay. They got to train them on that. But let's also talk about, well, what is the hazards of compressed air? We don't always think about compressed air, but if you accidentally shoot compressed air into your skin, you can create a huge embolism that can result in significant damage to you. It has nothing to maybe do with the technical component, but train them on what can compressed air do to your body and how hazardous compressed air is to you. Understanding maybe if you think about an air compressor tank, well, what is compressed air versus a compressed liquid? What's the difference in energy between those two? There's a drastic difference in compressed fluid than a compressed air in the amount of energy that they contain. So there's a lot of things like that as we think about that are worth training on to help people understand that have nothing to do with the technical aspect of doing their job. So we need to make sure that people are aware of those things as well.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a couple examples I can think of.
I have one, Ken.
Yeah, what you got, Mary Lou?
Hey, here we are a small company. We do have the tools and resources available for all the employees. We do safety briefings. We do an annual review, but we also bring in OSHCON, which is a voluntary audit from OSHA. This is a program by the state of Texas, and we bring them here. And in one of my last reviews, they pointed out something that has nothing to do with my procedures. It has nothing to do with the technical part of the company. They said, what would you do if you have an active shooter situation? I had never thought about that. Absolutely never. So after that conversation, we bring that up in our annual review every single time so that employees can put feedback, and we sort of know what to do in case of something like that. We are in a very safe part of town, and it would be very unlikely, but it is something that I had never thought about, and maybe it's worth discussing. Same thing with, okay, what happens in a tornado? Being hit in a tornado in Houston is also very, very unlikely, but it's important for everybody to know which one would be the safest room in the office to run to.
Yep.
So
now I have much more tornadoes now that I'm in Nashville than I did in Houston.
Yeah. So those things have nothing to do with my process. They have nothing to do with my day-to-day operations, but they are things that are worth talking about.
Yeah.
And having a plan.
Nope, definitely having a plan. But ultimately, what's really critical is you as a leader, you have a method and a process for identifying hazards and mitigating risks. At the basic level, how do we identify hazards? How do we assess them to determine what the level of it is? What controls can we implement to mitigate those? We got to reassess that every once in a while, and let's review, are the controls still working? If you say, look, we're gonna put a sheath over the electrical cords. All right, are we double checking the sheath is still in good shape every once in a while? You have to have a deliberate process as a leader and enforce that process. If you don't enforce the process, then it doesn't matter to anybody else. And this last one I thought was really interesting. This was just an idea from a safety professional and frustrations that oftentimes the safety professionals have with their organization. And again, not accusing anybody of living in these, but this is just an interesting thought that says, are you complacent in any of these? Are you guilty of any of these? Are you the organization that, that prioritizes safety until it gets in the way of production and the deadline is due, and then you're like, well, just do it anyway. All right, yeah, okay, we're okay with that. You make exceptions when there's other circumstances, or do you hold the line all the time? Those are just interesting things when you think about. Now, I know in a lot of this discussion, I've seen very firm and very hard and draw a very hard line when it comes to this. And I feel like I'll share the story on why that is. So the worst thing I've ever had to do in my life was go to the morgue and identify the body of one of my soldiers who was killed. Worst thing I've ever had to do in my life. I hope nobody ever has to go through and do that in their life. It's a horrible, horrible, horrible experience. My soldier wasn't killed in combat. My soldier was killed in an accident. So that really strikes a hard chord with me, because I don't ever want anybody to have to go through that. I don't ever want anybody to have to experience that and having to talk to his dad and talk to his dad and explain to his dad how that accident happened. They're just things that I don't ever want to experience again in my life. So I acknowledge the fact that I ride a very, very hard line with this. I don't apologize for that. But as you'll understand, the reason behind that is that's just an experience I'd never want to repeat. So I believe that we as leaders, we have the ability to ensure what you guys have talked about, that every single person goes home the exact same way they arrived. That's our responsibility as a leader. Let's take ownership of that responsibility as a leader and go out there and do our best. That's all we can ever do, is do our best, but have a good process, be smart about it, lead effectively, and go out there and figure out, well, how do we do things a little bit different, a little bit better? What are our gaps? Good. So I really appreciate the large participation in the leadership lunch today. Hope that it was valuable for you. I hope that you had some good thoughts and you got at least one good takeaway from it. Happy to stick around and chat as long as anybody wants to, but I like to start on time and end on time, respect you guys' time, but I'm here as long as anybody wants to. Otherwise, we'll be back next month on the first Wednesday of February. We do the leadership lunch first Wednesday of every month. Haven't figured out the topic yet, but this year I'm going to kind of plan them out in advance instead of just randomly try to remember or think about it at the last minute. But if you have anything in particular you'd like to chat or talk about as a leader, please do. And otherwise, have a fantastic, awesome day and go out there and lead people to better safety.
Thanks, Ken.
Great job, Ken.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Ken.
thanks a lot.
Thank you, Ken.
You guys are
Bye-bye.
welcome. Hey, Brooks, you still there?
Ken, I am. I'm sorry. I had somebody walk in my office. I apologize.
That's no problem.
No, hey, thank you so much for this. This was actually